Hey, everybody, we're back for Chapter 1, Section 1 of The Limits of Power. Picking up from there, it's the reasoning for America and going in. Title of this section, Chapter 1, Section 1, The Crisis of Profligacy. All right. To be sure, the ascent of the United States did not occur without missteps. Opera Bouffe, incursions into Canada, that didn't go well during the War of 1812. Ethan Wish will appreciate that. Will McKinley's ill-advised annexation of the Philippines, complicity in China's century of humiliation, disastrous post-World War I economic policies that paved the way for the Great Depression, Harry Truman's decision in 1950 to send U.S. forces to north of Korea's 30th parallel, among others. Most of these blunders and bonehead moves Americans have long since shrugged off. Easy on Truman. Just throwing that out there. He's my boy. Some, like Vietnam, we find impossible to forget, even as we persistently disregard their implications. However embarrassing, these missteps pale in significance when compared to the masterstrokes of American presidential statecraft. In purchasing Louisiana from the French, Thomas Jefferson may have overstepped the bounds of his authority, and in seizing California from Mexico, James Polk may have perpetrated a war of conquest, but their actions ensured that the United States would one day become a great power. To secure the Isthmus of Panama, Theodore Roosevelt orchestrated an outrageous swindle. Remember the deal with Panama and Colombia and how we screwed them over. We supported the Panamanian revolt against Colombia, right, in order for Panama to become an independent nation on the okay that they then allowed us the digging rights for the Panama Canal, aka screwing over Colombia hard. All right? The canal he built there affirmed America's hemispheric dominion. In collaborating with Joseph Stalin, FDR made common cause with the indisputably evil figure. Yet, this pact with the devil destroyed the murderous Hitler while vaulting the United States into a position of unquestioned global economic supremacy. A similar collaboration forged by Richard Nixon with the murderous Mao Zedong, the 1972 China visit, in order to create detente with the Soviet Union. It all comes full circle, people. All right? Helped bring down the Soviet Empire, thereby elevating the United States to the self-proclaimed status of sole superpower. Highlight this. The achievements of these preeminent American statesmen derived not from their common devotion to a liberating tradition, but from boldness unburdened by excessive scruples. Notwithstanding the high-sounding pronouncements that routinely emanate from the White House and the State Department, the defining characteristic of U.S. foreign policy, at its most successful, has not been idealism, but pragmatism, frequently laced with pragmatism's first cousin, opportunism. Stop there. What he means by this, everybody, is that our greatest moments... Now, this, again, you don't have to agree with this, all right? Our greatest moments have not come from us touting our ideals. They have come from us being pragmatic, and sometimes maybe sacrificing those ideals for the bigger picture of American supremacy, all right? Pragmatic, what do I mean by it? Remember, we talked about this. Booker T. Washington, pragmatic. Yep, should it be this way? No, it shouldn't, but it is the thing it is, and now we must deal with it. Right? That's the biggest thing. You know what? Dealing with the Soviet Union and Stalin, who some might argue could be a bigger bad guy, globally speaking, than Hitler. And if you were in a gulag, unquestionably so. Yeah, but we defeated, at the time, the evil the world considered the most evil, and we made ourselves the dominant power in the world. So it's a pragmatic issue, right? That's what he means by that. All right. What self-congratulatory textbooks once referred to as America's rise to power did not unfold according to some preconceived strategy for global preeminence. There was never a secret blueprint or a master plan. A keen eye for the main chance rather than fixed principles guided policy. If the means employed were not always pretty, the results achieved were often stunning and paid enormous dividends for the American people. Expansion made the United States the land of opportunity. From expansion came abundance. Out of abundance came substantive freedom. Documents drafted in Philadelphia promised liberty. Making good on those promises required political economy that facilitated the creation of wealth on an enormous scale. Highlight this. Writing over a century ago, the historian Frederick Jackson Turner made this essential point. Not the Constitution, but free land and an abundance of natural resources, open to a fit people, he wrote, made American democracy possible. Stop there. Half a century later, historian David Potter discovered a similar symbiosis between affluence and liberty. A politics of abundance, he claimed, had created the American way of life, a politics which smiled both on those who valued abundance as a mean to safeguard freedom and those who valued freedom as an aid in securing abundance. William Appleman Williams, another historian, found an even tighter correlation. For Americans, he observed, abundance was freedom, and freedom was abundance. In short, expansion fostered prosperity, which in turn created the environment within which Americans pursued their dreams of freedom, even as they argued with one another about just who deserved to share in that dream. The promise and reality of an ever-increasing material abundance kept that argument within bounds. As the Industrial Revolution took hold, Americans came to count on an ever larger economic pie to anesthetize the unruly and ameliorate tensions related to class, race, religion, and ethnicity. Money became the preferred lubricant for keeping social and political friction with tolerable limits. Americans, Reinhold Niebuhr once observed, seek a solution for practically every problem of life in quantitative terms, certain that more is better. This reciprocal relationship between expansion, abundance, and freedom reached its apotheosis in the immediate aftermath of World War II. Assisted mightily by the fratricidal behavior of traditional European powers through 2 world wars and helped by reckless Japanese policies that culminated in an attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States emerged as a global superpower, while the American people came to enjoy the standard of living that made them the envy of the world. And by that term, the fratricidal behavior of traditional European powers, it's a reference to the idea that the Europeans almost completely destroyed their own continent in World War I, and then 30 years later decide to do it again. Because why? Crazy? That's what they're getting. That's what he's getting at there. Fratricidal being a play on suicidal, except like brothers killing brothers, because they're all Europeans. Get it? All right. By 1945, the American century forecast by Time Life publisher Henry Luce for 4 years earlier seemed miraculously at hand. The United States was the strongest, the richest, and, in the eyes of white majority at least, the freest nation in all the world. No people in history can ever ascend to such heights. In order to gauge the ensuing descent, when the correlation between expansion, abundance, and freedom diminished, it is useful to recall the advantages the United States had secured. Highlight this. By the end of World War II, the country possessed nearly 2/3 of the world's gold reserves and more than half its entire manufacturing capacity. In 1947, the United States itself accounted for 1/3 of world exports. Stop there. The same cannot be said, by the way, now. Its foreign trade balance was comfortably in the black. As measured by value, its exports more than doubled its imports. The dollar had displaced the British pound sterling as the global reserve currency. In the Bretton Woods system, the international monetary regime created in 1944, making the United States the world's money manager. The country was, of course, a net creditor. Among the world's producers of oil, steel, airplanes, automobiles, and electronics, it ranked first in each category. Economically, wrote historian Paul Kennedy, the world was its oyster. And that was only the beginning. Militarily, the United States possessed unquestioned naval and air supremacy, underscored until August 1949 by an absolute nuclear monopoly, affirmed thereafter by a permanent and indisputable edge in military technology. The nation's immediate neighbors were weak and posed no threat. Its adversaries were far away and possessed limited reach. For the average American household, World War II had finally ended the Depression years. Fears of that wartime stoked prosperity might evaporate with the war itself proved groundless. Instead, the transition to peace touched off an unprecedented economic boom. In 1948, American per capita income exceeded by a factor of 4 the combined per capita income of Great Britain, France, West Germany, and Italy. That's all those combined. We had more money per family. All right? Per person, per capita. Highlight this. Wartime economic expansion, the gross national product, grew by 60% between 1939 and 1945, had actually reduced economic inequality. Stop there. Greater income and pent-up demand now combined to create a huge domestic market that kept American factories humming and produced good jobs. As a consequence, the immediate post-war era became the golden age of American middle class. Post-war America was no utopia, far from it. Even in a time of bounty, a sizable portion of the population, above all African Americans, did not know their either freedom or abundance. Yet lagging only a step or two behind the chronicle of American expansion abroad is the second narrative of expansion, which played itself out at home. The story it tells is one of Americans asserting their claim to full citizenship and making good on those claims so that over time, freedom became not a privilege of the few, but the birthright of the many. It too is a drastic tale of achievement overlaid with ambiguity. Who merits the privileges of citizenship? The answer prevailing in 1776, white male freeholders, was never satisfactory. By the stroke of a Jeffersonian pen, the Declaration of Independence had rendered such a narrow definition untenable. Pressures to amend the restricted concept of citizenship emerged almost immediately. Until World War II, progress achieved on its front, though real, was fitful. Make sure I'm on the right page. During the years of the post-war economic boom, especially during the 1960s, the floodgates opened. Barriers fell. The circle of freedom widened appreciably, and the percentage of Americans marginalized as second-class citizens dwindled. Many Americans remember the 1960s as the freedom decade, and with good cause. Although the modern civil rights movement predates that decade, it was then that the campaign for racial equality achieved its great breakthroughs, beginning in 1963 with the March on Washington and Martin Luther's I Have a Dream speech. Women and gays followed suit. The founding of the National Organization for Women in 1966 signaled the reinvigoration of the fight for women's rights. In 1969, the Stonewall Uprising in New York City launched the gay rights movement. Highlight this. Political credit for this achievement lies squarely with the left, aka liberal Democrats, right being conservative Republicans. He leans Democrat. Just prepare yourselves. You don't have to agree. You just need to understand. Abundance, sustained in no small measure by a post-war presumption of American global leadership, made possible the expansion of freedom at home. Stop there. Again, highlight from political credit to freedom at home. And stop. Rebutting Soviet charges of racism and hypocrisy lent the promotion of freedom domestically strategic dimension. Yet the possibility only became reality thanks to a progressive political activism. Pick the group. Blacks, Jews, women, Asians, Hispanics, working stiffs, gays, and the handicapped. In every case, the impetus for providing equal access to the rights guaranteed by the Constitution originated amongst the pinks, that means leftists, liberals, and bleeding heart fellow travelers. Highlight this. When it came to ensuring that every American should get a fair shake, the contribution of modern conservatism has been essentially nil. Stop there. Had Martin Luther King counted on William F. Buckley and the National Review to take up the fight against racial segregation in the 1950s and 1960s, Jim Crow would still be alive and well. Granting the traditionally marginalized access to freedom constitutes a central theme of American politics since World War II. It does not diminish the credit due to those who engineered this achievement to note that their success stemmed in part from the fact that the United States was simultaneously asserting its claim to unquestioned global preeminence. Highlight this. From World War II to the 1960s, more power abroad meant greater abundance at home, which in turn paved the way for greater freedom. Stop there. And what they mean by that is the more we projected our power, the more things we had available to us and the money to buy said things, right? Which in our minds gave us more freedom, okay? Stop there at greater freedom. The reformers, highlighting from World War II, stopping at greater freedom. The reformers who pushed and prodded for racial equality and women's rights did so in tacit alliance with the officials presiding over the post-war rehabilitation of Germany and Japan, with oil executives pressing to bring the Persian Gulf to America's sphere of influence, and with defense contractors urging the procurement of expensive new weaponry. The creation by the 1950s of an informal American empire of global proportions was not the result of conspiracy designed to benefit the few. Highlight this. Post-war foreign policy derived its legitimacy from a widely shared perception that power was being exercised abroad to facilitate the creation of a more perfect union at home. Stop there. In this sense, General Curtis LeMay's nuclear strike force, the Strategic Air Command, as a manifestation of American might, as well as a central component of the post-war military-industrial complex, helped foster the conditions from which Betty Friedan's National Organization for Women emerged. A proper understanding of contemporary history means acknowledging an ironic kinship between hard-bitten, cold warriors like General LeMay and left-leaning feminists like Miss Freedom. SAC, the Strategic Air Command, helped make possible the Feminine Mystique and much else beside. Feminine Mystique being Betty Friedan's very, very important book in the 60s that kind of paved the way for what women should be striving for in terms of independence. All right? And with that said, we end Chapter 1, Section 1, The Limits of Power, subtitle, The Crisis of Profligacy. All right, hey, thanks for stopping by this evening, and I hope to see you guys soon. I love you all, and I'll see you later.